You guys know how we end things here. At least we have for several weeks. This is the end, though, of that. This is the end of our presentation on Alan Moore's Twilight of the Superheroes. We have done this for 7 weeks. We missed one because of Jeff Johns, but otherwise we've done 7 of these. And the story's over. We got through the story last week. We resolved everything. The big fight's over. And I really wanted to do one last chapter because I wanted to talk about what's gone on outside of the story since then. And to be honest, in some ways, I think what's happened since is maybe more interesting. Because Twilight does have a legacy. No one's ever seen it come to life. It doesn't exist outside of a proposal, but it has a legacy and it has a story unto itself. So let's talk about it. This is our final deep dive into Twilight of the Superheroes. This is part 7. It took 8 years before the Twilight pitch document made it onto the internet. So from 87 to 95. We all know that in the intervening time, Alan Moore was no longer working with DC. He took his ball and went home. And, clearly has had a vendetta against them ever since. Some people think it's rightful, some people don't. One of the major conversations going on the internet at that time, in 95, when it first came out, was whether or not it was even real. There were a lot of people who did not believe that the Twilight pitch document was real. Then, once it was confirmed to be real, they didn't believe that it was written by Alan Moore. Even though I feel like it's obviously written by Alan Moore, but
yeah.
There's bondage in it, of course it is.
Yeah.
You might be about to say this, and I apologize if you are. Who confirmed it? Do you know?
So this is essentially everything I'm going to be talking about is based on Google groups and online chats and things like that. And so a lot of creators have said actually that they have read it. This is getting a little ahead of it, so let's not linger on it. But Mark Waid read it in 88, I think he said, or 89, somewhere in there, because he was an editor at DC at the time. So even at that point, a lot of people in the know knew it existed. And then one of those people leaked it, and once it was out, people started to confirm the veracity of it. But a lot of people were questioning whether it was too dark, whether it should have existed at all. If you can put yourself in the mind of somebody who was reading this pitch document in 95, right? You still haven't seen a lot of the ways that things would go. Remember, this is I believe 95 is still pre-Kingdom Come?
Just like a year, I think.
Maybe.
I think Kingdom Come is 96.
Okay. So there were
96.
Yeah. Okay. So we're still pre-Kingdom Come, although it's in the works.
Yeah.
And we're pre a lot of things that people think about today, like even what's it called? Game of Thrones, obviously the books, but like television wise, the massive popularity. We're behind all that. That hasn't happened yet. So a lot of these ideas are genuinely new to people. And they were surprising and people couldn't accept them. People really hated the idea of the Marvel family incest, which I get why you would hate that.
Wonder why.
And so much of that would be baked into English sort of royals culture. They marry their cousins all the time.
True.
And that's not even like blasphemous to say or whatever. Like the queen that just died, her husband was literally like her first cousin.
And they do it for a specific reason. They're trying to keep the bloodline, right? Isn't that the whole...
Yeah, I'm sure that's...
Nice.
I wanted to read a comment. First of all, I wanted to do a whole episode just reading the comments from the Google group for between the years 95 and 98.
Shit.
It's amazing. It is amazing. Maybe I'll do like a Patreon thing for that.
Oh, that'd be good.
I wanted to read one in particular because I think this one will intrigue us all. And it's written by an individual. I can't confirm if this is the same person, but it's written by somebody who refers to themselves as Al Ewing.
Whoa.
And it says, I always thought, I'm sorry, this is in reference to the Marvel family incest. He says, I always thought that rang fairly true. Remember, you had saucy old Uncle Marvel hanging around with all the young kids and then taking his clothes off at every opportunity to reveal a kinky red body stock. I'm sure young Billy was corrupted by that old fiend. Anyway, all superheroes are pervs. And if you're also an adolescent boy, I'd have thought that only compounded the problem. Here's hoping for the talkie-tawny bestiality scene. Cheers, Al.
Coming soon to X-Men Red.
Oh, no.
So
That's
again, I don't know
Mark,
that this
that is clearly tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah. Well, again, we don't know that that's the Al Ewing.
That smells like British humor.
I will admit it kind of feels like him. And there are a lot of other creators, by the way, that are in these comments.
Okay.
A lot. Warren Ellis is there. I saw I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but there were a lot of creators there that were commenting. So obviously Al Ewing would have been a young man at that point, probably not a creator. Anyway, the Twilight pitch document was something that people could not readily find. Almost as much as people were commenting on it, maybe double that were asking for it because they couldn't find it. Because as soon as it hit the internet, DC started their shenanigans and saying, wait a second, you can't post this. This is not okay. And so somebody had the idea of, wait a second, let's get this off the internet. Let's put this out into the public. Because again, if you weren't an internet person, you're not reading this. And this is 95. I don't know that most people had the internet. So someone said, let's get this out there. How can we do this? And that someone's name is Rich Johnston. Yes, the very same owner of Bleeding Cool, fun fact, ran a publishing company in the 90s called Twist and Shout Comics. And Twist and Shout Comics had their comics. They had the X-Files that they were publishing. And then I believe the other book was called Dirt that they had that they were trying to get over.
Was X-Files an IP of the show, or did the show come after the comic? I guess it's irrelevant.
It's based on the show, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. It has to be, otherwise that would be nuts. But the book's called Dirtbag, by the way, the other book that they were promoting. But Richard Johnson wanted to publish Twilight through his publishing company and struck a deal with Alan Moore to publish the proposal, titled Alan Moore's Twilight, A Proposal. Now I will refer to the actual comments that Rich Johnson made in the Google group in 1995. We're going back to December 95. Well, it's no real news for the internet, but Alan Moore has agreed to allow Twist and Shout Comics, that's me, to print the Twilight proposal. So hopefully for April, there will be a solicitation for Alan Moore's Twilight, A Proposal. The book will exist to allow non-net users to read the work and also to promote the name of Twist and Shout Comics for next month's Dirtbag 6. This excited so many people. But it also caused people to question how this could even be possible. How could you publish this with DC's characters? Mm-hmm. People were citing law, saying that there was precedent for them being allowed to do this, citing a book called The Uncensored Mouse, a comic book published with a blank cover that included inside the early tales of Mickey Mouse, of course, owned and copyright by Disney. People felt that because that was possible at the time, that it must mean that you could publish a book with Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman in it and not get any fire from DC Comics. Of course, that's not true. Disney went to bat for their Mickey Mouse. And as it turns out, they were right. The company that was publishing the book actually didn't have their facts straight, and the copyright had not yet actually rolled over. And so Disney went to court and they were able to win.
30 years too early.
And they never will.
Yeah.
And they were literally republishing old Mickey Mouse.
Exactly.
Which is like, a big no-no. But Warren Ellis actually took to the Google Net to ask Rich Johnston to ask Alan Moore if DC had paid him. Because if DC paid him, and if Alan Moore has a check that explains what he was paid for, if he was paid for that proposal, DC's got all rights. But if they haven't, then Alan Moore has a case.
Then it's just a spec script at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
And so on December 14th, Rich Johnson posted an update and he said, sigh. You know it's something when a person starts a sentence with a sigh.
Was it asterisk, sigh, asterisk?
No.
No? Okay. All right. There was no ooh-woos here. Okay.
No. He said, I received an email today from Jay Kogan, DC Comics Director of Legal Affairs. By the way, I think he's still at DC all these years later.
Damn.
Referring back. Just before I was going to get in contact with them. Full of phrases like, quote, violate our rights, and quote, without limitation, and quote, we ask you to confirm. Apparently, DC not only claimed ownership of the characters, but also the proposal. Looks like we'll have to pull this from our schedule, guys. I've replied asking if there's any way we could cooperate on this, but after email with friendly Patty Jarris, I'm not holding my breath. Not even a month later, we get another update. On January 4th of 1996, Rich Johnston posts, he says, Alan Moore's Twilight, a proposal ain't happening, folks. Talks with DC have stalled. Stalled as in up Schitt's Creek without a hardback Watchman. And apparently, every DC editor has now heard of me. Well, perhaps I can turn that around into an opportunity. I would say Rich made good on that opportunity for what it's worth.
Yep.
And so the question at hand now is whether or not DC has the rights to the proposal itself. Someone tested that. Someone said, you know what? I'm not satisfied with the idea that we can't post this proposal. I'm going to challenge it. And so this is what they did. This is from hobos.com. And we go all the way back to the summer of 97. And this is the post. Well, after yet another month of waiting, I have re-enabled Moore's Twilight proposal. Over a month ago, DC's lawyer promised proof of copyright ownership, quote, within a few weeks. That has not arrived. Therefore, I can only assume that Moore still owns the copyright on this presentation. As near as I can tell, they still haven't registered the copyright. The proposal will, however, only be available during standard working hours from Eastern Time, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It is thus only available during the hours when DC's lawyers can present proof that the copyright was in fact transferred. So here's the issue. DC is telling the internet at this time, you can't publish our copyrighted material. And so they would receive a copyright strike, whatever that looked like at that time, whenever they would do it. The thing is that when asked to produce the proof that they actually own it, DC never has. Literally to this day right now, they never have. And so this guy tested their gangster. And he said, okay, if you own the copyright, produce it between the hours of 9 and 5, and I'll never do this again.
Wow.
And they did it.
Call the bluff.
Wouldn't the copyright on the characters be enough?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So we got updates about this over the years. In Christmas of 98, we got an update that said DC still hasn't reached out. So the proposal is going to stay online. February of 98, though. Whoa, that doesn't, no, 99. February of 99. We got an update that said, Yowzers, received a letter in the mail from DC today. No wonder it took them so long. Rather than find the proof they actually own the copyright, which proof I am increasingly sure does not exist at all. They actually sent the proposal off to U.S. Copyright Office in their name 10 years after it was created.
That's funny.
This doesn't mean anything morally, of course. Anyone could do that. You could pop the latest Superman off the Copyright Office in your name, and they'd probably just stamp it and file it, and everything would be hunky-dory until DC found out and let the feds know, at which point you would be hit for $2,500 fine. Unfortunately, the only person who could really contest this is Alan Moore. So the Twilight proposal is offline, at least at this site, indefinitely.
What? Was Alan Moore paid for this? Did he ever say?
To my knowledge, and I tried hard, I could not find a single instance of Alan Moore talking about this.
Talking about whether he was paid or just talking about it at all?
Talking about it.
Gotcha.
Not one reference to anything.
If he wasn't paid, then in my mind, it's like, what's the difference between this and fan fiction then?
Yeah, that was my mind was going.
The difference would be, in my mind, in terms of why they didn't do it, is the fact that it does include their characters. And so at that point, it's you're getting money off the fan fiction.
I mean, like, not in terms of the publishing, but in terms of having it online.
Oh, well, they stopped hounding people years.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. I think at this point, I mean, I have a little bit of like a conspiracy theory. I'll share it with you.
You?
I do. I have no knowledge if this is true or not. I think that the only reason that they pursued this copyright so vehemently at that time is because of Kingdom Come.
Oh, interesting.
Sure.
Because Kingdom Come is a very similar. Let me not say it. It's a similar story with similar ideas.
Structure.
And if Twilight Proposal was already available, if you look at the Google groups, people already, once it came out, people already said, "Oh my God, yeah, Mark Waid aped this completely." So I think they were trying to control the narrative on that. That's just my theory. And
That
then
makes sense.
when the conversation about what DC did to Alan Moore went so south, they were like, "Well, we can't, be seen as monsters in this at all. We're not going to pay the man, but we're also just going to let this rock." So, a number of elements from Twilight are obviously present in a lot of different stories. We've talked about it. We've talked about what's the book that Tom Taylor has? The
Dark Knights of Steel?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Dark Knights of Steel has a similar concept of like the houses and things like that.
But that has a similar concept from Game of Thrones.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%. And we could go on and on with the kinds of things that have similarities, but to Tyler's point, you could also attribute it to something else, right?
Was George R.R. Martin in those forums?
I didn't see him. This is taken from a Wikipedia article. A number of story elements from Twilight of the Superheroes have made their way into works later published by DC Comics. The 1991 crossover Armageddon 2001, for example, involves a messenger from the future traveling to the present to convince superheroes to avoid a disastrous future. That is what Rip Hunter and Constantine are doing. A dark future vision of superheroes as irresponsible was shown in the series Kingdom Come. DC later introduced a more flexible approach to continuity, similar to what Moore proposed with the idea of hypertime. Finally, the miniseries Infinite Crisis, along with the series New 52, or rather 52, reintroduced the multiverse to DC Comics. Other changes to individual characters that have appeared in the proposal, such as Teen Titans Cyborg becoming almost wholly mechanical, were introduced as well. It's hard to parse out what could have been taken and what not, because the idea to bring back the multiverse is not novel. Moore had it in 87, but it's not weird to me to think that another DC genius would come up with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm about to make a food analogy, so bear with me. But it's like if a dish had like think of Twilight of the Superheroes as like a sandwich with all these different ingredients and certain layers and stuff. Then somebody else decided to use turkey. Somebody else uses mayo somewhere else. It's
Right.
I don't see how taking individual parts is taking from Twilight of the Superheroes, because anyone can come up with the same thought. Or B, if this was in a drawer somewhere and editors referenced it and be like, hey, we got this idea you can take from it. I don't know if they used it as almost like a
Mhm.
Frankenstein sort of situation.
Like a sounding
They
board.
just,
for
they
like
just
term-
salvaged parts for it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, Alan Moore's never spoken on the subject, but the creators of Kingdom Come have.
Ooh.
So Alex Ross was asked by Wizard Magazine, I believe it was 98, but I don't have the date in front of me, about the origin of Kingdom Come. And he said, initially, I pitched the story to James Robinson because I figured he was a young wannabe Alan Moore.
Oof.
And I wanted this thing to be as much like a Watchmen type project as possible. Mark Waid was the one who came most well recommended by DC editors in terms of his love and knowledge of the history of DC heroes. And that's how marriage occurred. Stop. Now I'm going to go right to what Mark Waid said. Because remember what I said. Mark Waid was an editor at the time. This is what Mark Waid said. I read Twilight in 1988 or 89. So when I was a DC editor, and I loved it. Alex, however, had never read it until we were well into the second or third issue of Kingdom Come after it was all blocked. It's possible that some small elements of Moore's pitch influenced some of my own ideas. That's what good writing is supposed to do. But I think we ultimately took the DCU in a more hopeful direction.
Sure.
Now, I'm not saying this is a fact. I'm not even saying I believe it. But let's put the pieces together. Alex Ross wants to do a big epic at DC similar to Marvel's that he did at Marvel. He wants an Alan Moore type writer. He wants a Watchmen type feel. DC does not give him James Robinson. Who do they give him? They give him a person who already read Twilight to tell a story that is similar to Twilight. Now, that's not the only reason they would choose to give him Mark Waid. Mark Waid is highly talented, probably one of the best writers DC had at that time, and still true.
Mark Waid feels like DC's Busiek, if they want to make the Marvels comparison, you know?
Yeah.
In terms of the guy who like just knows DC in and out. So I can see them doing that. And he's a little more tried and tested, more of a company man too.
I think it's
was kinda-
complete. Yeah.
Robinson was kind of a hotshot, I feel like, in terms of the kind of stuff he wrote.
I don't believe in my heart of hearts that they deliberately stole.
Sure.
But if someone, like the argument that I just made, you can't really refute it either.
Sure.
This is why movie studios and television studios do not take spec scripts for the same characters.
Yeah.
Right.
If I write It's Always Sunny, an episode of that, and I send that to one of the writers, they cannot look at it. They cannot open an email. They can't do anything. Because if I have proof that they've looked at it, if anyone read any part of it and anything like that shows up in the show later on, I can sue.
Yeah,
It's just liability.
Comics are the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would also argue there's no way anything here is provable, but I would also argue Waid says it's possible. I read Twilight. It's possible some of that stuff influenced my writing. I guess the argument of whether he stole it sort of depends on when he would have read it.
88 or 89.
So nearly a decade, almost a decade earlier.
Yeah. So,
But
my point being is maybe they're in the back of his head, but after a decade, assuming he didn't read it again, in that in between time.
Look, and I'm sure Kale, you can say this as well. I've had ideas that I think are awesome and I'm way into them. And then I realize down the road of iterating on it, like, oh shit, wait, this is just like that other thing that I like.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Or this is that similar plot twist, or this is like that happens constantly. So you can easily give Mark Waid the benefit of the doubt in that way. The problem is that it never looks good for DC. Because if you take it at face value, right, which people aren't really inclined to do anyways, obviously DC did Alan Moore super dirty. And here's this great story that everybody wants to read that now they don't get to. But we get Kingdom Come, which some people thought was inferior. right? So that's unfortunate for DC. But then on the other hand, people are inclined to think that DC would rob Alan Moore, steal his pitch, or not steal, he gave it to them, but then like not pay him for it, and then assert copyright that they don't necessarily have on the pitch because he didn't get paid, and then mine it for everything that they can and use it to tell stories a decade plus down the road.
The other thing that I'm thinking of, Moore is very open with what DC did with him and Watchmen, right? Very vocal about it. The fact that he doesn't talk about this smells like, oh, he probably got paid then.
I think if he got paid, then DC would have just produced copyright.
Right. Yeah. I think he does. He doesn't talk about it out of like maybe pride or something. Just this was a thing that I did.
I
like,
thought that's
why,
the stuff
why,
he
why
talks
do you
about.
bring it up?
He
I have
probably
a,
doesn't care about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was only just a proposal. Let's be honest. It's not like there was a full book made. Even in his proposal, it's very wishy-washy about what's set in stone and what's not.
let me ask you guys a question. Did you know? That's so funny. Mark McGrath in the chat just said exactly what was coming next.
Oh yeah.
Is it?
I was gonna
Mark
ask.
McGrath?
Did you know that DC actually ended up publishing it?
No.
So DC published the Twilight pitch document in a book called DC Through the 80s, The End of Eras. And this came out just a couple of years ago or so, and it features the pitch document. I read it. It is soulless. It feels uninteresting. They don't give it any context. It's presented flatly. There's no preamble. There's no lead in. It's just the pitch document.
Like verbatim, just whatever they had, just plastered that.
With some like a blue background, but that's it. No character art, nothing. Just the words. And reading it, it actually made me feel angry at DC.
Did you send death threats?
Sorry?
You didn't send death threats, did you?
No.
All right, good.
Because it's like, man, you guys fought hard for this in the 90s. You didn't pay Alan Moore for it. This was 40 years ago, and you're just going to publish it like this, not acknowledging the controversy or your role in it, or all the years that people tried to get this and couldn't. It feels wrong. They didn't pay him, assumedly. We don't know that for a fact. But I'm assuming they didn't pay him a red cent for this. That feels wrong. And I don't think Alan Moore would take DC's money now, outside of whatever royalty checks he gets for Watchmen. I'm assuming he gets some kind of royalty.
I think he does. I think he's sworn it all off.
Oh, well, there you go.
I think Gibbons gets it all.
Right, yeah.
Oh,
to me,
yeah?
that's disgusting.
But by his choice, Marco. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, coming into this, I had specific thoughts about Alan Moore. And I wanted to see if this process would change how I felt about Alan Moore. I felt like Alan Moore was a bitter old man who didn't get what he thought was his just desserts. And so he was throwing a temper tantrum and was mad that the book that he wrote connected too well with people. That's what I always felt, right? After 8 weeks plus of thinking about this, writing about it, reading about it, digging very deeply, going all the way back into the 90s, my mind has changed. I don't see Alan Moore like that anymore. I have a deep sadness now for what happened to Alan Moore.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I have a deep sadness.
That's how I always felt. It's just creators' rights are non-existent.
Right. But what I'm talking about comes from a slightly different place. because what I learned about Alan Moore that I didn't know before is that he loved this.
Yeah.
He loved it so, so, so much. He still loves comics, but comics hurt him. And he watched it happen. This man watched it happen already to Ditko.
Yeah.
He watched it happen. And it happened to him. And he let DC slide. This is when the proposal was made, him and DC weren't on the absolute best of terms already.
But it was still an energetic proposal. It was full of passion for that world and what it was. Yeah.
100%. You couldn't write this proposal. You couldn't have these ideas without having a deep passion. And it's in the proposal. It's dripping with passion. It's in how he talks about it. He loves it. It's so clear. He doesn't hate superheroes at this time. Maybe he's warped now based on how things have gone for him, but he loves them so deeply. And you know who also knows this? His daughter.
Yep.
Leah Moore has talked about her father. And I wanted to read some of her quotes as we close, because I think they hit on what I'm sort of talking about. Quote, seeing folks sharing the Hollywood Reporter article, this is a reference to creators not getting their just desserts. And she says, and wondering how this is news, it's why my dad walked, why he's been angry for 30 plus years, why he doesn't want to chit chat about movie or TV. He was the best, and they did it to him. And every interviewer acted like he was alone. He tried to make them into something that provoked thought and feelings, that addressed issues, that spoke to people the way superheroes had always spoken to him. That seems crazy to me. I have his collection of Marvel comics, dog-eared from reading, from love. I heard so many times about his excitement at finding a stash of secondhand Marvel comics in a junk shop, in a box, or buying them off spinners in Great Yarmouth on holiday. He could not love superhero comics more if he tried. Jack Kirby was his idol. Ditko was his idol. The medium he adored was ruled by corrupt despots, that the people who made that magic were abused, that their contribution was not valued, that it was stolen from them. He already hated that before Watchmen. He already knew Kirby had been shafted. So when it happened to him, and then again, it wasn't just a business deal gone awry or a bit of bad luck. It broke him. The thing he loved most, the thing he poured all his time and energy into for his whole entire life, he could not do anymore. Can you imagine if he hadn't been fucked over? Instead of being grumpy Alan Moore shouting from his cave, he had spent the past 40 years, putting out book after book for DC and the rest, creating vast worlds full of the superheroes he loves, enjoying comics. It's a damn shame. I agree. It is a damn shame.
It almost makes you think, like, what if Moore was around, maybe started comics, a decade later, in to catch that image wave, where creator-owned stuff was more accessible and much more mainstream. What things would have been like then, but
I mean, he ended up doing stuff with was it
Sure.
1960? Was it 63?
he did stuff, but this was post him already being jaded by everything.
Sure.
It is Alan Moore through a lens.
Right.
There are still amazing Alan Moore works that come out. Alan Moore has done a lot of great things since the DC days. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know about it because he's not working for Marvel or DC, and therefore, the publishing power to put, advertising behind it is not the same. But Alan Moore is still a tremendous creator, still a highly celebrated creator with the works that he would go on to do. I just feel sad for what we didn't get from the superhero end. And I feel sad for him because his life could have been different. He could have been so happy. I think about Bret Hart, the wrestler, and what people say about him and what he became after his career was cut short. It's the same. Yeah, Alan is bitter. Yeah, he's grumpy. Yeah, he's jaded. But there's a good reason for that. Any final questions for
Big companies
Twilight?
suck? I don't know. This has always been my thought of Alan Moore. It's more of a tragedy, really, than anything.
Yeah.
I personally wish he would talk about it a little more, but that's not my call.
Yeah, more information would make it a better conversation to have.
Honestly, the story of Alan Moore as a creative mind, I think is rife for potential in its own right. As I don't want to turn someone's life into a commodity. Commodify, yeah. I don't want to commodify someone's life story, but that's just things we do. But
Well, Mark McGrath makes another great comment in the chat. The tragedy of the Moore DC split isn't about who was right legally or morally. The tragedy is that a company chose not to have 10 more Watchmen level projects from maybe the best comic writer ever. 100 million%. I don't give a damn how much money they're making off Watchmen. You mean to tell me that if Alan Moore sticks around at DC and you give him what he's worth, that maybe Twilight doesn't become a Watchmen level success? Maybe it's not Twilight. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a run on Green Lantern. Maybe it's a run on whatever it is. That's not worth something?
Yeah.
Not worth more?
Well, the trajectory of comic books changes forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Appreciate all the support over these 7 episodes about Twilight of the Superheroes. This is definitely one of the highest highs of my time as a part of this show. So thank you for enjoying it. Appreciate the enthusiasm and the engagement. I will do this again. We will do this again. Don't know about what necessarily, but we will do another deep dive. If you've got ideas for what we should do a deep dive on, let us know. Share those. Because there's a lot of stuff that I don't know about. I chose this for a lot of reasons because I didn't know the story. And I had bad feelings about Alan Moore. And I wanted to challenge myself. And I'm so grateful that I did that. And I'm grateful that I have a platform to do that on. So thanks a lot. If you enjoyed that, if you enjoyed our show today, if you enjoy what we do in general, patreon.com/thecomicsPals is the best way to show us your support. We talked earlier about voting with your dollar about the comics that you don't like. Vote with your dollar for the podcast that you do like. We've got a lot on offer. You get a name and a shout out here on the show for a certain tier. You get access to early voting on the book club, well, voting in general in the book club, early access to anything that's available early on our end. Our exclusive show over there called Palling Around. You get access to our newsletter. So we're packing it on our Patreon page. So that's patreon.com/thecomics-pals if you want to check that out. We really appreciate it. Watch this show live every Saturday at 10:15 a.m. Eastern, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern for Pals Pulls. Check us out on Tuesday, May 2nd for the Lazarus Book Club, Lazarus by Greg Rucka and Michael Lark. First 3 volumes if you want to catch up to read along with us. We appreciate that. And join our Discord server. We've got people joining, which we're really thankful for. You guys are great. Appreciate the interactions over there. Come hang out with us. Links in the description to anything we've talked about. Anything we're wanting you guys to know about, there's a link to. So hit that link. Kale, plugs.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Comics Pals, episode 340. You can find me and my work at kaleward.com. That's CALEWARD.com. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram for as long as that dumb bird app is still working. At Toto in Tow. That's TOTOINTOW. I watched the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers anniversary special. It was pretty bad.
I heard it.
It was pretty bad.
It's a thing.
Damn.
But I think if you watched Power Rangers as a kid and you were into it, I think if you like, you won't get past the bad stuff. You won't. It's bad, but they hit that sweet spot where you can feel it again. You really can.
Is the putties that do it?
Putties are there.
Nice.
Hearing Billy and Zach do the morphing business, I gotta tell you, it feels really good. So bad or not, I think it's worth a watch. It's only an hour, and it's an easy hour.
I'll be watching. Can't wait. Marco?
You can follow me at Mr. Marco Nomoto on Instagram and Twitter. I went to Coachella this past weekend, and that is going to be the majority of my newsletter this week. So stay tuned for my thoughts. My first time going, a lot of good music. So I'm gonna spiel. I'm gonna talk a whole lot about it, and then if I touch on it, I might. I don't know if I have enough time for all of it, but there's some AI stuff that I've been working on. So,
Rose, how dare you use AI?
cool.
Tyler?
I'm still pissed Marco didn't go to Charlie XCX's set at Coachella. Just saying. You can follow me at the Tyler Olson on Instagram and Twitter. My cat says it's lunchtime. No, his food. I have an automatic feeder. I just heard it go off. He just wants attention. What can you talk to me about? I have a shipment of some figures coming in that I forgot I pre-ordered. Which after what the IRS did to me, was a double hit. But it's fine. It's fine. So those might be coming soon. If you like X-Men, we'll see what happens.
What the IRS did to me.
Technically, what someone else forced me to do, which then messed with my taxes.
Yeah,
Whatever.
oh, yeah.
As for me, I'm on Twitter and Instagram only at Sean Soapbox. I had a great time today, and that's all I want to say. All I want to say is today's a good show. I had a lot of fun, and hope you guys had a good time too. We will see you next week. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Until then, we're the Comics Pal signing off. Take care, guys.
See you next week.